Well, Vicky Pryce is an international economist and she joins us now for more analysis on all of this. So, Vicky, thanks very much indeed for coming back onto the programme. What kind of expectations do you have for the UK joining the CPTPP? Doesn't exactly roll off the tongue. You know, how big a win is it for each party?
I think it's quite an important step in terms of looking outwards. I think post-Brexit, this is what the government has been trying to do with all the deals that it has already signed, and the ones that, of course, it signed as rollover deals from whatever the EU had already arranged with other countries. So just to bear in mind what's been going on, we've signed about 71 deals so far. This one that we're talking about today hasn't been signed yet. 69 of those were just rollover deals that were already in existence when we were part of the EU. Now we left, we wanted to at least continue for a while having, similar access, if you like, to some of the markets as we had before. But of course, this particular deal, if you add to that, of course, Australia and New Zealand, and also the discussions we've been having to deepen a little bit what we're doing with Japan, because again, we've signed a deal with Japan, a rollover one from what the EU already had. But the expansion into different areas, now, of course, we're talking about Trans-Pacific areas and countries, widens, I think, the remit of what we want to be looking at ahead. But remember, we do have a World Trade Organization which is supposed to be encouraging a reduction in tariffs, certainly for goods and also for non-tariff barriers as well, that they should be coming down over a period of time. What is going on instead is that we're having all those bilateral agreements, if you like, and various regions getting together to facilitate, if you like, this trade opening, which absolutely needs to take place rather than necessarily relying on multilateral agreements. And that messes up things a little bit. And of course, for the UK, we still have a big market, which is the EU, and that is the one where I think some of the negative aspects have taken place already, where we've seen our trade with the EU being reduced and our trade intensity in the UK being reduced as a result of Brexit.
And of course, that's right on the doorstep here. The government in Britain is saying in its strategic paper on this that it expects the deal will boost GDP by just 0.08% over about a decade. So critics are saying this is rather small fry, but you can see some good outcomes for the UK from this.
Well, what you can see is that particularly if it expands and it has the other countries joining, and you've just been discussing that, but that could be a positive. But if you look, though, at the 11 countries that make up that partnership for the moment, we already have deals with 9 of them. They're not free trade deals, they're just trade deals. It's only really Malaysia and Brunei with whom we don't have an agreement at present. And if you look at, for example, Singapore, we already have a sort of digital trade agreement, and with loads of the other countries as well. So the impact, this is why the calculation is that the impact is quite small. I think where the gains might be is if indeed it expands and it becomes much wider. You were mentioning other countries joining, and I think that's perhaps the positive aspect of this. It does not mean that other countries or even regions like the EU may not want to get closer to this particular partnership. And what we're seeing is, in fact, the EU is trying to do similar deals of the sort that the UK is talking about, like, for example, with the US and with India. It's been trying to do that for quite some time, but there are blockages, of course, as we know, political blockages in particular.
Indeed, Vicky, you mentioned the US. What are the downside risks to this deal? Could this Asian deal actually impact on efforts to get an American deal?
Not really. I think the American deal is one that isn't probably going to happen before the next presidential elections. And the impression we all get is that President Biden certainly doesn't want to get involved in doing trade deals right now. He has quite a lot of other issues to deal with, in particular, of course, how to stimulate the economy to move towards green investments. As we know, with the Inflation Reduction Act, and the EU is trying to do something similar and negotiate, at least with the US, that EU companies are not excluded from this. So there's a lot going on, which is, if you like, at the periphery of a trade deal, if you want to call it that, because there are so many things at stake right now in this area, and they do require very careful diplomacy, I think, from both sides, so we don't end up, in fact, with a trade war rather than getting closer together.
Right, and I'm sorry to bring it back to the B word, but Brexit, it was never going to be easy. We heard arguments that there would be short-term pain. We know there has been. Are we starting to see any kind of light at the end of the tunnel now?
Well, there was a mention in your discussion before of the Northern Ireland Protocol. That, of course, has been amended and signed. We don't know, of course, yet whether it's going to go through Northern Ireland itself, and we may get some stability there. I think that matters, partly because, of course, it means the relationship with Europe might improve, which is a positive thing. We lots of areas of the trade agreement that we signed, or the cooperation agreement, trade and cooperation agreement we signed, which have not been developed yet. So there could be huge benefits that come from that if relationships have improved. But also, of course, the US. I think they had been looking at some improvement in what's going on with Northern Ireland before they would even think of engaging with more trade discussions. But I don't think we're going to see the US ones really taking front stage in the short term. But perhaps those with the negotiations with the EU in various areas that really matter for the UK in various sectors may become considerably easier in the future.
Vicky Pryce, great to get your thoughts as always. Thanks so much.
Thank you.